Good afternoon. Let me welcome you on behalf of Konrad-Adenauer-Stiftung in Stockholm to our today's discussion on German politics. KAs Stockholm is active with projects in all 5 Nordic countries. We want to provide systematic knowledge about political processes and current events in Germany, the European Union and the Nordic countries. And it is our goal to strengthen international strategic partnership through dialogue. Federal elections to the German Bundestag will be 4 months from now, and we would like to share with our audience and followers in the Nordic countries information about the current political situation. We have invited an insider from the Konrad-Adenauer-Stiftung as our guest speaker for today. It is Viola Neu. She is the deputy head of the Department for Analysis and Consulting at KAS in Berlin, and she leads the team for electoral and social research. She follows closely all state elections throughout the year and the opinion polls ahead of the federal elections. As Germany is an important political and economic partner for all Nordic countries, it is always good to know what to expect after September 26, after 16 years of an era with Angela Merkel as a chancellor. I would now like to ask Viola Neu to give us her overview about the current political status in Germany for approximately 20 minutes, and then we will follow with questions and answers, which you can put via Zoom, but also via YouTube. So let me propose one question that you might want to take up, Viola. What allowed the Green Party in Germany to rise to the recent #1 or equal with CDU-CSU in the polls? Viola, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much for the invitation, dear ladies and gentlemen, dear Gabriele. Well, I have a very brief, short presentation. If you like to, I will start with it and we can deal with the different questions about the different parties later on. I have one figure that shows the rising of the Greens and explains a little bit. But now starting perhaps at first with the presentation, I'm trying to share my screen. So I hope you can see it.
Yes. Very good.
Just a moment, please. So here we are. Well, I've been asked to talk about a little bit about the polls in Germany. So I'll start with a classic question. The first figure I want to show you is a question. What would you going to vote if there is an election on next Sunday? Because well, Sunday is the day of election in Germany. So this chart shows what's happening in this question since 1998 and now. And what you can see is a dramatic change in the mood, well, overnight. You see parties rise, you see parties falling down. There's a very volatile and fluid situation on the voter market. And that is what we can now see at the polls. Well, you see at the very end of the figure that the Greens and the Blacks, the Christian Democrats and the Green Party are quite close together. And you see there's a situation of some other parties which are about 10%. The left is less than 10%. And the Social Democrats are in the middle of 10%, perhaps 15% or 17%. That was a long-term development, and what we can see now is another figure. We've been conducting on a daily basis for 14 weeks, and that is what's happening from one day to the other day. So you see there is no stable climate. You don't have a stable group of supporters of any party, so it changes dramatically overnight. And that is a situation where the campaigners have to deal with. And you see it's not very easy, it's quite complicated. So when you hear somebody say, well, about our voters, it's a very, very slow share. And how that is a very, not a fair share, but a very low share, I can show you in this figure. We've been asked, well, of course, what are you going to vote if there's an election on Sunday? And we asked about an alternate party, which people are going to vote. So the first column, you see the supporters of the Christian Democrats and the Christian Social Union. And you see that about 21% could imagine to vote for the Social Democrats. Another 22% could imagine to vote the Greens. 13% could vote for the Liberals. And if you look at the last row, you see only 27% of the supporters of the Christian Democratic Union could just imagine to vote for one party. And if you look at the last row, you see there's no advantage or disadvantage for any party. So we have a share of, well, perhaps voters who are more stable in their decisions, about a quarter of the electorate. We have one exception to this right-wing, I would call her now, extremist party of the AfD, where we have 45% of the voters who could not imagine to vote for another party. If you're looking back at the first column, that's just an example. So which voters are possible for the Christian Democrats to reach? You see there's a 24% of the voters of the Social Democrats who could imagine to vote for the Christian Democrats. You see another 20% of the voters of the Green, and 40% of the Liberals, and another 22% of the AfD. Well, you have to compute these numbers to the real outcome, because it makes a difference if a party which has the supporters of 20%, another 20% could imagine to vote for a party, that it makes a difference if you have a party that is just good for about 10%. So if the Christian Democrats would be able, for example, to reach also 20% of the supporters of the Green Party, it would make a difference about 5 percentage points. If they would be able to reach all the voters that could imagine to vote for the Christian Democrats, it's less than 1 percentage point. But the message is quite easy. It's not possible to predict anything in the German voter market. So if you have a question, what will be the outcome of the federal elections? So I just want to say right now at this moment, because I know this question would come, I don't know, because, well, it's not, I don't have any crystal balls. And you see, there's a lot of movement, and most of the people could vote for one or another party. This is a very, very hard situation for all the campaigners, because they have to reach also people who are trying to change or not trying to change their voting behavior. Now, talking about the issues, this is a political agenda and the most important problems. We now have, well, like every other European country, the agenda dominated by the questions of fighting the pandemic situation, fighting the virus, and all the things. But you see the green lines, that's a question of environmental politics and climate change politics, that it's rising. And we think that the pandemic situation is not as important for the voting behaviors and other issues. It just dominates the agenda, but it's a question of relevance, if it's really relevant for voting behavior. So let me change the perspective, because I've been asked what's been happening to the Greens. Is it the issue? Because, well, they are well known to have a long tradition in talking about climate and environmental issues. But what we can see, it's the green line is the supporting of the Greens, and the blue line is how relevant is the issue climate and things like that. And you see in 2018 a dramatic change in the supporter landscape of the Greens. It's been rising and rising. And yes, what's the reason for it? We had the chairs of the Green Party had been elected in January 2018. And they managed to change the image of the Greens in a dramatical way. So it's not the old Greens party which are fighting for every position and who are in extreme positions. It's a more moderate party. And also, the face of the party has become more nice. And it's not the issue that helped the Greens to become a dominant party in the party systems. It's a change of the party itself, which is very, very important. But I've been talking about the Corona crisis. And
can you share, can you make it a bit wider, bigger, the screen? Because
no, I can't. I have a full screen right here.
You have a full screen? Okay.
I have full screen. I don't see anything to change it.
Okay.
I'm sorry, because this is full screen right here.
Okay.
Is it too small? Well, it's not very important because it's also in German, so I explain whatever you can see.
Yeah, okay. Perfect. Yeah, I know. Just for those who know German.
But I'm sorry.
No, it's okay. It's okay. Yeah.
Because my screen is a full screen.
Yeah.
We've been asking an alternate question. We've been asking whether people feel fear of. And what you see on the second position is what comes out of the Corona pandemic. But the first position, what is really threatening people, is the global warming, is the climate change. And this data is from December, where we've been in a totally lockdown, and shops were closed, schools were closed, and you know all these things, what depends on a lockdown. But even in this situation, the climate change and the global warming was much more threatening to people since the Corona pandemic. Well, the other issues are not of interest, but one thing I just want to mention. On the, well, I would say in the middle level, we all expected that people fear an economical crisis because the pandemic situation costs a lot of money. It stresses the budget. We are having deaths over deaths. And so it was very probable that the economical crisis would be much more, or the fear of an economical crisis would be much more important for the people, but it's on a lower rank. It's not that important as we expected. It's a climate change, which is dominant in the political climate in Germany. Now I want to switch the issue, talking about the candidates. Yes, there has been a lot of discussions in Germany about the candidates. And as Gabriele told me, you've been watching all the discussions in Germany and see the process very interested. But now this is the actual data. We've been asking the three candidates. It's Annalena Baerbock for the Greens. It's Olaf Scholz, which has been nominated by the executive board of the party in August last year. And we have, of course, the chair of the Christian Democrats, Armin Laschet, who's governor in North Rhine-Westphalia. And now you see the situations that there's no advantage or disadvantage for one or two candidates. It's a very equal situation right now. What we had before, well, it's another question. We've been asking if one of the candidates is appropriate to be chancellor. And this was a situation where Markus Söder, the governor of Bavaria, was a front runner, and all the others were in other places. But it was a situation where we had 5 potential candidates, and it's very hypothetical. And just go back to the other figure. That is what is now the situation after the situation is cleared and everybody knows what the candidates what the candidates will be. I've been asked to say a few words, and I try to make it very brief. about the situation of the AfD. Well, the first thing which is important to mention, yes, our society is polarized too, like many societies in Europe, in the US, and worldwide are. But the division is between the supporters of the AfD, which is approximately 10% of the electorate, and all the others. I've just, that's one chart as an example. It's a satisfaction with democracy, but it doesn't matter whatever we are asking, every value, every attitude, everything we could measure in the polls, there's always the same situation. The voters of all the parties and the supporters of the AfD, they differ in every way you can think if you're just talking about issues or values or attitudes. But what we have done also, we were just interested what is the emotional situation of the electorate. And just show you the last three figures. We have been asking which emotions parties provokes. And you see there's one party, that's the blue line, that's the AfD, where all the people are feeling fear, indignation, anger, and despair. All the other parties also don't provoke so much emotions. But changing the perspective, going to the level of the supporters, here's just one example of the Christian Democrat supporters. What's happening now? The party that is supported provokes also feelings of confidence, satisfaction, trust, hope, and sense of security. And the AfD is a total opposite. It's like the average voter feels, even the supporters of the Christian Democratic Unions feels fear, anger, despair, and indignation. So just the last chart, that's a change. These are the feelings the supporters of the AfD share. And you see a dramatical change. It's the opposite of all the other figures I've shown. The own party evokes a feeling of confidence, satisfaction, trust, hope, sense of security, while on a lower level, of course, like it is amongst the supporters of the other parties. But you see all the other parties, especially the Greens and the Christian Democrats. The voters of the AfD feel fear, anger, despair, and indignation. So we don't have not only polarization, talking about issues, talking about attitudes and values, but we also have a division of the electorate in an emotional way. So talking perhaps in campaign speech, so it's totally impossible to have an advertisement for both groups, for all the others and the AfD, so you cannot talk with confidence and fear, and you cannot talk about anger and trust. So that's the situation, the emotional situation, and of course, the rational situation in Germany. And well, now I'm finished with my presentation. I thank you very much for your attention. Well, I like to hear your questions. So I'm just stopping.
Yeah.
That works.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Viola. That was really very interesting. And I think also when you focused on, I mean, the question of feelings and the polarization of feelings and how voters of different parties really think about these issues. That's very, I think, very interesting. And I would also like to say that it's amazing that you are doing this job. I mean, all these surveys and polls. That's really great, because KAS is a think tank, and I think we can be proud of having such a survey institution as well. Thank you again. So we already got one question from Erik Theselius from Sweden. And then now that the question about the Greens is really high on the agenda, and it's interesting for Sweden because there's a different perspective. And the Green Party in Sweden is small, is in a coalition with the Social Democrats. right now. So Erik Theselius asks, given the polls as of today, how realistic is a red, green scenario? And do the Greens, if they could choose, prefer a left-leaning coalition or a center coalition? Well, you said you will not, you cannot give any suggestion about the outcome, but I think that's a very important question for Sweden and other Nordic countries. And he also writes, Erik, that Robert Habeck has previously said that he would prefer cooperation with the left or not. So are the Greens more within the center coalition or more to the left? What would you say?
Well, perhaps we should start talking about the Green Party. Well, so the party convention, where the manifesto will be discussed, is in the middle of June. And what we can see that there are, well, approximately 3,000 amendments to discuss in the manifesto process. And the base of the party, what I would like to say at the convention, it's like the base strikes back. Because it's the more radical positions are much more popular than the real politics positions. Now the manifesto, which is a draft manifesto, of course, it's very well diffused and open. Well, there are aims, but it's not defined very clearly what's going to happen. Well, if you compare it with the situation 2017, where they were talking about very much details about income taxes and other things, you could take your computer and it was clear what it would cost you to vote for the Greens. And well, they didn't do it in this time, but the membership of the Greens are not satisfied with this program. And well, it would be interesting what's the outcome of the party convention in June. But now changing the perspective, that's a membership, if you're going to the supporters, because well, in the way the Greens become huger and huger, became more and more supporters. The position became changed from a very left position to a position that's going stronger and stronger into the middle, into the average. While we have, if we are talking about special issues, still a polarization between the Greens and the AFD. The supporters of the Christian Democrats are a total average party because the supporters are just choosing the average position on every issue we have. And it's a moderate position, but we see a split between what the people think that they're going to vote for the Greens and what the party itself thinks what they should do. And this is well, that's something like a cleavage that makes it not easy to talk to both groups. And we don't know what's happening over the campaign. You know, when the campaign starts, so the candidates are what? They're followed by the media. They don't have a single moment just to be free or private, because everything what they're doing now is important. And well, it would be very interesting what's happening over in the process. Now we had in the winter, spring discussion about homes and private property, if it's necessary or if it's not good for the climate change. Now we have discussion about flight, if we should just, well, to reduce it is well, a very good known position, but they just prefer to go by train, which is not perhaps an option for the people. Yes, talking about coalitions, well, I think the party elites would prefer a center coalition. But it's possible that the membership, we don't know which process will be at the end realistic, if it's a process which is just done by the elites, or it's a process where you have a decision of the membership. And I think the membership would prefer a red-green coalition. So that's a very, it's not easy to predict what's happening. What's very important is the experience the Greens have in the federal states, because we have two stable coalitions with the Christian Democrats. One is led by the Christian Democrats in Hesse, the other in Baden-Württemberg, whereas governor of Baden-Württemberg, a Green governor, is now a second time in a coalition with the Christian Democrats. And the experiences of the coalitions are good on both sides, because it's in a respectful climate, it's professional managed, and the problems that came were managed in a professional way. And perhaps that's important. But we know there are a lot of other coalitions where the Greens are members, and it's a very, very colorful landscape we have. And so it's not possible to predict. But I think this is the basis of the party. The base will just prefer a red-green coalition. And I think the elites have a special preference for a center coalition.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Thank you. Thank you. So it's still hard to predict. We see how the campaign will develop. But anyway, thank you for your answer. We have some other questions. One question from Leonie Schiedek. She asked, very interesting perspective to look at the emotions, and she asked if you could say how the Green Party voters feel about other parties. If you maybe have a graph on this, or
well, I have not prepared a graph of it, but it's just the same landscape as you can see as the Christian Democrats I have shown you. The own party is just associated with positive feelings, and only the AfD has a negative, it provokes a negative emotion. So because I've just shown one figure, because it doesn't change if you're looking at the other party, it's always the same pattern everywhere.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you. And it's Eric Teselius again who asked about also the feelings. So could it be, he asked, could it be a strength for a party to invoke strong feelings, even if those feelings can be negative?
Yes and no. It depends on the party.
Okay, yeah, yeah, that's true.
Well, talking about what a right-wing extremist party, what should say that they don't have any alternative than negative feelings, because, well, they're living from fear and not from trust. They're living from bad feelings and from bad, I would call it more or less propaganda or fake news, whatever you would call it. That is what they need to survive. It's not their job to say everything's good and you could be relaxed and have an optimistic view to the future, everything will be good and we can manage it. It's their job, well, to say it in a more ironic way, just to provoke these bad emotions. Yes, but for all the other parties, it doesn't work.
Okay, thank you. We also have another question now, which is more to foreign politics. So I would also like to ask you about the Social Democrats. You said the Social Democrats are now being maybe 15%, maybe a little bit more in the polls. So how come they lost so much support? The voters going away to the Greens or to other parties? So why is it? I mean, just to give an understanding for our audience in the Nordic countries, because here social democracy is still quite strong.
Honestly, I'm still looking for the answer. It's not so easy, because, well, it's a long process. We have a process of alienation between party elites and the party membership. It started in 2000. 3 or 5, it's not very clearly, where we had social reforms that were hardly discussed into the party. And this is still vivid in the party. When every party convention, somebody is talking about the old stuff, which really nobody remembers in detail what's happening in the former times. But I think what's more important, well, Sir Ralph Dahrendorf mentioned in the 80s, that the problem of the Social Democrats is their success, because all the aims of equality, of chances in the society are more or less fulfilled. So it's a question what they are good for. And what we see over the last 2 decades and the last campaigns as well, they're looking for social groups. For example, they are telling if there's a working man and he's doing this and that, and then we have to do something political for him in the expectation that if I'm doing something social issue, then people are going to vote. But it's not that easy, like I've shown you, because it's a lot of it's much more things that are necessary to give a party, to support a party, than it's just a social situation. And what we now know very precisely, that the questions of social structure don't play any role just for minorities in voting behavior. There are still, yes, very, very small groups where you can explain the voting behavior because of their social structure. But the majority is not voting because of their social structure. They're just voting because they have special attitudes. And I think it's a misunderstanding of which problems they should solve or not. And they haven't found a new compass, a new way to talk to people. Well, the convention of the Social Democrats is a few weeks ago. And well, it was just a one-day convention, which is very untypical, but now due to the situation of the pandemic. And they're talking about old issues, as far as I feel for it. And it's not that they are having an idea to give the party a new image, new issues to solve problems in another way. And yes, they've been in a great coalition for 2 times, and well, to say it, well, say factual, they didn't do a bad job. It was a good job. But it doesn't help them to get out of the corners they are sitting, and well, sometimes it feels like they're helpless. And for example, what is the main issue of the campaigns they decided in the last year? It's respect. Well, that's a feeling of, okay, perhaps it's the way you work with people, with a society, but it's respect is not solving any problems. It doesn't help in the pandemic to say we are respectful. And I think that's a lot of management problems you can see at the Social Democrats. But the key finding we don't have to say, well, if you change this, then it would help you really. There's no key findings that switches the situation in ways that it helps the Social Democrats.
Okay, interesting. Thank you. Thank you. And there's another question also. Again, you don't want to talk about the outcome, but also, as you mentioned, we have had the Great Coalition. And there's a question, so we think a black-green coalition would be possible, but is there also a Jamaica coalition a possibility? Because Armin Laschet, he has signaled that he would prefer a coalition with the FDP, the Liberals, as it is in North Rhine-Westphalia. So what do you think? I mean, just to speculate, is this also a possible scenario?
Yes, it is. Well, if you remember figure 1, yes, everything is possible. Of course, it's possible to have very different colors. and Jamaica coalition between the Liberals, the Greens, and the Christian Democrats. Yes, it's one option, but we just had another federal state election, and the outcome is a coalition of the Social Democrats, the Green, and the Liberals. So even this model, well, is possible. It depends, of course, on the outcome.
Okay, so everything is possible, basically.
Of course,
as we see it right now. Yeah, another question. Do you think, Viola, that the shift from the Merkel era and the strong CDU to the increase of the Greens will affect Germany's position in the European political context? Yeah, what might change also? What can we expect in foreign politics when it comes to maybe even a government led by the Greens?
Yeah, well, differences are more by degree, because all the candidates we've been talking about are pro-European. They want to have a very strong European Union, and I don't expect dramatic changes, even if it's a red-green or a red yellow green, or green black green yellow, or any coalition. Well, there's one point which is unpredictable. It's a position of the left, because the left is an anti-European party. She wants not to be Germany member in the NATO, and she is anti-Atlantic. She is she doesn't well, the home of capitalism, you know, the United States of America. That's not something they have in their hearts. So this could change if there's a red-green coalition. This could change the position in the European process a little bit, not totally, but slightly, because when there are many compromises, then it depends. It depends on what the outcome of every party is, but the left they're only pro-European Union if it's a union which is going of nationalization, of socialization, changing private property, and all these things which are important for the deep reds, I would call them, to the left. And you know, also questions how to deal with Russia or other countries. Well, they have there's another setting which is important for them. And if the human rights in the Soviet Union or somewhere, that's not on their agenda. So yes, it could change the process a little bit, but not dramatically, because, well, Germany is one of the countries which is still, well, the people are still pro-European Union. You don't have all the negative effects you see in some other Eastern countries. So most of the people say, well, it has advantages and disadvantages, but they prefer to get things done on the level of the European Union.
Okay, thank you. I would also like to ask another question, to ask you to elaborate a bit on the AfD, the Alternative für Deutschland, compared to countries in Northern Europe. I mean, in Sweden we have the Sweden Democrats, in Finland we have the True Finns, and in Norway and in Denmark we also have right-wing populist parties. So what do you think? What is the approach? I mean, we have heard a lot about AfD the last years even, but what would be the approach in the campaign towards the AfD? And is it until now absolutely excluded that any of the democratic parties will have a cooperation, any kind of cooperation with the AfD? It might be interesting to hear for.
I'm sure that there will be no cooperation, no coalition, no talks, nothing like it. Yes, of course, there are discussions about it. That's normal. It's a democracy. But the party elites, and it doesn't matter if you're talking about the Christian Democrats or the Greens or something, would never be in a coalition or cooperation together with the AfD. We have the situation, well, in some of the Eastern Federal States, but it's not easy because they have voter outcome for more than 20%, and that's not easy to go on if you're having an opposition of left and well, for the Christian Democrat of AfD and of left, and the Christian Democrats do not tend to have a coalition with the left either, and that makes the business quite hard. But there's no possibility. It's not. You can't think about it. There's no possibility that there's a coalition or any model where the AfD is integrated. This belongs to their development over the time. Well, perhaps the founding was in 2013. Perhaps, I pronounce, perhaps it was a right-wing populist party, but just perhaps. But now the development is quite clear. Perhaps it changed. I'm not sure if it's a change, but it's visible that the AfD has become an extremist party, right-wing extremist party. And there's some consensus in the German democracy that there is no place for right-wing extremist parties. And well, the supporters, not a growing number, it's decreasing because they lost their issues. The most important issue was the migration crisis, and every question that deals with issues of foreigners, integration and all this stuff, Muslim, and you know what. That's the same thing like it is all over in Europe. And since the question of migration are not on the top of the list, it's not so easy for the AfD to find issues to talk about things, because, well, as an opposition party, which is just talking to the corona crisis and pandemic situation, it doesn't make sense, and even the solutions didn't make sense. Nobody agreed with the solutions. And they don't have a sustainable idea what's doing with the climate change system. And well, I'm sure that the outcome will be under the outcome of the last election, but we know there is a fixed potential, as I've shown you, where people are not going to change into to other parties, or what they're very successful in getting votes from non-voters before. And there's a possibility, I don't know if it's happening or not, that these people are just changing back to not going to the election, not going to the ballots. But that's just a possibility. But it will be relevant for the outcome. But I think it's in our polls, it's not very probable that it's more than 10%, or much more than 10%.
Yeah.
Because what we know, this group is one of the groups which is very easy to deal with. That helps us in the empirical sciences to be a little bit more predictive than we can do with other parties and supporters, because they differ so much from the other voters that it helps us a little bit.
Okay, thank you. Interesting. Yeah, so there's we spoke about the AfD, and I think that's also an issue which will be important when it comes to the next state elections in Sachsen-Anhalt. So we have another questions from the audience. How important are the eastern states, Sachsen, Sachsen-Anhalt, Thüringen, Brandenburg, to the CDU, the September election, so yeah, September 26th. And there's also a question, interesting, which role does Friedrich Merz play? Yeah, and also I think that's what you just said. Can lost CDU voters return to CDU from AfD? I mean, I think that's really a good question. You know, you see, we have insiders here.
Yeah.
People really know German politics well. But yeah, I would like to ask you, I mean, what the questions I just put to you. So what do you think?
Well, perhaps the first remark, there was a misunderstanding of the electorate because the AfD just said, well, it was spreading fake news. Well, speaking in an empirical way, the whole electorate of the AfD, 20% were former voters of the Christian Democrats, 80% not. They were coming, well, in the eastern federal states, they're coming from the left. They're coming from the Social Democrats. Well, a few were coming also from the Green, but a very, very small number. And some were non-voters before. So that's the first mistake talking about the AfD, because it's not flesh of the Christian Democrats. That's just a misunderstanding. Well, the AfD was, well, liked the idea to be a conservative party like the Christian Democrats, which is just a little bit more conservative. But that was, well, it was their attempt to create an image, but it was never the reality, and never the reality on the voter market. Yes, the AfD has more supporters in the Eastern federal states, that's right, but not in every Eastern federal state, so not in Mecklenburg-Vorpommern, for example. Yes, it plays a role, but we know that the voting behavior between the federal states and the federal level differs a lot. So it's not predictable what it means for the voter outcome. Yes, we have the support of the Christian Democrats is less in the Eastern federal states, but honestly spoken, it is also less in the Northern federal states, which were not part of the former GDR. So yes, we have a situation where we have different voting behavior in different federal states, but the average is the important thing, and not looking at one federal state and to have made this decision on this base. Friedrich Merz, yes, well, I think he's very important for the membership of the Christian Democrats. Depends a little bit on the social structure, because, well, the social structure of the membership of the Christian Democrats are, well, not the youngest males, to say in these words, and they feel, well, feel comfort hearing and seeing Friedrich Merz, but he's not playing such an important role on the market of the electorate. So here, well, I think it's a little bit overestimated, but he's very important for, well, the situation in the party.
Okay.
And well, just another point, and it shows the compromises Armin Laschet is just now making by integrating him into his team. That's a very important sign to the members of the Christian Democrats. That's not a process where you get it's integrated with different positions, and this shows respect to the membership.
Okay, thank you. So our audience follows the news because it's really was just recently that Friedrich Merz actually was running successfully for a mandate to be a candidate for the Bundestag.
Yes.
So I don't see any more questions from the audience, and I think we have had good questions and we had very comprehensive answers. So if there's nothing coming up right now, I think we can close the session a bit earlier. yeah, because I mean, there are so many topics, but we do not want to over stress also the audience during lunchtime. So I would like to thank you, because Viola, that was really great, and thank you also for the presentation you made. We have this presentation available, so if anyone is interested in getting the figures, and I think about the charts about the voter feelings, I mean, that was really interesting. So we can share this, of course. That would be good to have it, and for you as well. The session has been recorded, so you can always go back on YouTube and find the recording, and also look up the charts again and the figures. So everything is possible. This is what Viola said, and we don't know until now what the outcome will be. I mean, that's a strong message because it's only four months until September elections. But it looks quite, I mean, it looks not that bad, because all candidates are pro-European, and we do not expect anything dramatic, as you say, any dramatic changes when it comes to European politics. What is important for our partners in the Nordic countries. Thank you very much for being a speaker today for our Stockholm office. All the best for you and the audience, and have a nice lunch break now. See you soon. Bye-bye. Thank you.